Hello, my name is Zachary Hausner, and this is my presentation for CIS 606. And my project was looking at um, the population of different neighborhoods and their health food complaints. The data sets I used for this project were from the Kansas City open data for their 311 requests, specifically for um, their health requests or their cases, and with the census, the 2010 census for different neighborhoods populations. So the importance of this question, first of all, is when restaurants are looking at their metrics on how their sales are doing or how their restaurants performing in comparison to other restaurants. What they generally look at is the population that it's near to them. And the importance of this fact is because there's an expectation that people don't like to drive to go to restaurants. Typically, most of your customer base is going to be local customers. You're going to, of course, have some travel in, and that's going to be dependent upon different areas. But one of the metrics that we often look at in restaurants is and performance is like how well are you hitting your target demographic, which is in that area, as well as other metrics as well. And one of the interesting aspects when I was working at one of my restaurants was health code violations, because this particular restaurant had a few health code violations. And just kind of seeing that process, from soup to nuts on this side of things is rather more interesting. So when I gathered the data, so that's the importance of the question. The hypothesis I generated is one would expect to see more 311 complaints about restaurants given a higher population. That seems pretty straightforward and easily provable for this kind of class, and the results were actually very interesting that I found. Um, so first of all, let's talk about how I gathered the data. I I used a Python script to collect the data from the Kansas City open data resources and from the Kansas City. They had the 301 requests and the census summaries from 2010. And then just for ease of access, I could code this in Python, but it was just easier for me to visually see the data. So I used Excel, specifically Google Sheets, to complete all of this, compile the information. And I removed a lot of the extraneous data and information. The most specifically, the more interesting aspects of this data wrangling was handling different errors, not errors, but the different complaints that happened in areas that were not targeted. It was fascinating. If I wanted to spend more time with this, one could have scrubbed that data and reassigned that data and made inferences to figure out what location it was referring to. But in this case, I didn't want to have an error for misappropriation of those data points. So I chose to eliminate anything that was blank. Also, I chose to eliminate anything that was canceled. The important thing with the canceled information is that a lot of times those kind of complaints may be legitimate, but the person who submitted the complaint doesn't want to follow through with their due diligence. So they could count, and I could have ran this analysis looking at those canceled requests or complaints, like a half value or a 1/3 value, but I chose to remove them entirely. Um, I also removed anything that was out within a date range. I chose from 2010 to 2013. That's four years to kind of get a good feel, because I don't want to go too far beyond the census. I would have preferred to use the 2020 census, but that has been completed yet. I don't want to go too far beyond that because I feel like the data would be skewed when it comes to populations, because populations can change from year to year. So, to the analysis, I used a scatter plot. You can see on my screen here. Um, if I can switch the camera around, I'll just do this. You can see the scatter plot here, that the correlation or I'm sorry, the regression is that of a 0.066. And I mean, you can see that there is a trend line that the higher population you have, the more complaints you'll have. However, what was interesting to me was the fact that that is not entirely true, and that's a very weak relationship between the amount of complaints and the trend line for the population. So my explanation toward this information is when we were in the restaurant and hospitality industry, we really should not be relying upon native population groups to see how well a restaurant particular or hotel is faring, but rather other metrics. And certainly population is a big key aspect, but it's not as key as I had previously understood, and that the metrics that I've ran when I ran my kitchens, like based upon those metrics, they were misleading. So I made some decisions based upon information that was given to me by corporate headquarters that was actually inaccurate. So, or I would say partially inaccurate. There is a relationship there, and we do see a trend line increase. But what we don't see is the strong relationship I would expect to see like a 45-degree angle on that trend line, um, because that makes the most sense to me. But that is not what we see here at all. In fact, I'm pretty sure what we should be seeing, we should be looking at instead of population, would be the amount of transportation that site receives given every month or every week, and that can usually be picked up by the landlords for what do you call it, real estate purposes. But even then, that makes me hesitant because a lot of those numbers are figured in through other data, such as from the transportation department, like how many cars are driving by the roads near that location, not how many cars are parked in that parking lot, how many cars are going to specific restaurants. That data is rarely counted by the real estate offices themselves. That'd be private metrics, and that's why I think we see a lot of those metrics being calculated in house by different stores. They have their own people counters um, to kind of help give a better image to that. But in reality, that population to complaints metric, which is actually kind of okay to get some more context around here. The reason why that's important is like how efficient is your kitchen? Is your kitchen actually operating in a way that's meeting health and safety standards? And if they're right within the range that you expect to see within that population group, then they're probably doing okay, but you probably want them to be better than that median range. Um, and you want to give some forgiveness between the population differences between different neighborhoods. That was the hypothesis. So if you're going to have a higher population density, then you're going to want to have more complaints because there's more people there, right? But no, that actually is not the case, which means every complaint needs to be factored in just as seriously as any other ones. And there could be some skewing here and there. Like there could be, just like we know in this region, that there's some picky eaters who go to restaurants and just like to troll. But restaurants will suss that out pretty quickly. But that, just as a general marker, that to me is a very significant and interesting find. Thank you.